Hello, students. Welcome back to class. I hope you all are having a great day today. We're going to go ahead and continue with our notes on sectionalism. Before I jump into the day 5 notes, I want to do a quick recap of our day 4 notes. The big things we talked about were the revolts and the rebellions led by slaves and abolitionists like Nat Turner and John Brown. The next big thing we talked about on day 4 was the election of 1860. This is where Abraham Lincoln becomes president of the United States. And this is when the South, especially South Carolina, they feel neglected. They feel unheard. They feel that they are betrayed. And they feel that the federal government is violating their rights and violating the Constitution in the way that that election was carried out. And the Electoral College, they feel like, was very unfair towards Stephen Douglas, who was their main man, their front runner. And when he received nearly the same number of votes from the popular vote as Lincoln did, but less than 10% of the electoral votes that Lincoln had, they felt that that was very unfair. And that's one of the biggest things that caused them to want to secede and break away. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump into the day 5 notes. And that's kind of where we left off from yesterday. Okay. Uh, go ahead and pause your video here and write down these terms for today's notes if you'd like. The topics that are on the left, like we've been doing the last few days, go ahead and write those down. Leave some space in between. That way you can add extra if you need to. Okay, so back to our notes here. When South Carolina decided to break away, they left the Union in December of 1860. Now, the election of 1860 was in November, so less than a month later, South Carolina officially secedes from the Union. After they did this, 7 other states joined them. Well, 6 other states joined them for a total of 7. So the states that left, first was South Carolina, and these are not in order, but first was South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas followed suit right after South Carolina. So within weeks of South Carolina leaving, there were 7 states who had left the United States. And they began to form the Confederacy, or the Confederate States of America. Now, if we go back and we think about our original form of government for the United States, we had the Articles of Confederation. That word confederation, same here, Confederate, confederation. It's more of a union or a brotherhood, and it's very loosely tied together. And the emphasis that the Confederate States of America are going to place on the states is state power. And that's one thing that they felt that was lacking under the United States Constitution. They felt there was too much federal government power with the Constitution. They felt that their voice was not being heard, and they felt that they were going to continue to be mistreated as long as they were part of the United States. So when they created the Confederate States of America, they made sure to give plenty of power to the states. Now, they go ahead and join together and create this officially. They create the Confederate States of America in February of 1861. So just 2 months had passed since they had broken away from the United States, and they had gone ahead and made their new country, if you want to call it a country, Confederation. And they elected a president, Jefferson Davis. That's this guy right here. So he is the first president of the Confederate States of America. Now, on day 4 notes, we talked about Lincoln and what he discussed in his inaugural speech. Now, I want to give you a little bit of a timeline here. Davis, in his inaugural speech, talks about, in February of 1861, he talks about giving power to the people. Okay. He wants the people to have power in the states. And then also he gives power to the people, saying that if the government is not doing what it should be doing for whatever reason, it's time for them to change that government. They are supposed to abolish that government that is not giving them what they need or treating them well. And they started a new country, and that's basically their justification for breaking away from the United States. Now, just a month later, uh, Abraham Lincoln, when he gives his inauguration speech in March of 1861, he's talking about how the Union cannot be dissolved. We talked about that in our day 4 notes. He said the Union cannot be dissolved. You can't really secede from the United States. So throughout this Civil War that we're about to get into, I know we haven't officially gotten there yet, but throughout this war, Lincoln continues to refer to these states as states that are rebelling, but not that they are not part of the United States anymore. He sees them as part of the country still, but they are doing their own thing. Okay, um, so that's one of the big differences between Davis's inaugural speech and then Lincoln's inaugural speech or inaugural address. Okay. Now let's get to the beginning of the war. Okay. Uh, there is a fort called Fort Sumter. Now, if you can see here, South Carolina is right here, and Fort Sumter is in South Carolina. It's right on the coast of the Atlantic Ocean there. Fort Sumter, this is a federal fort for the United States. So this has been here for a long time. It's been here since before the South Carolina and the Confederate States had broken away from the United States. Now, there were still federal troops here. There were supplies going in and out of this fort all the way until South Carolina seceded. Now, these troops that are here are basically stuck here because South Carolina, being South Carolina, they said, since this fort is in our territory, this is our land, it belongs to us now. Well, the troops inside of there, they don't feel the same way because they are part of the United States Army, which is way up here. Okay, now it's here. This fort is here and they can't just pick it up and move it, but these people are stuck here. They know that if they leave, they could be attacked. So what Lincoln does is he decides to send a ship from the United States full of supplies and food and things that the people need in that fort. And he sends this as a peaceful delivery. He's trying to get supplies to these people so they don't starve to death. But the Confederacy does not see it this way. They see this as an attack. Now, if they really felt threatened by it or not, we don't really know, but they do see this as an invasion of their land from a foreign country, which is the United States. Okay. And this gives them justification to go ahead and fire upon this ship. And this is what begins the Civil War. This is the first battle of the Civil War. Now, in this battle, this is unique because one, nobody dies in this battle. It goes on for about a day and a half. It's about 36 hours long. Nobody dies. There's no major injuries, but there is conflict. There is fighting, and eventually, the ship that had come to bring supplies basically loaded up the troops that were inside of that fort and went back to the United States. So they loaded up, got back in their ship, and they went north to the United States. Okay. This is a victory in the South's eyes. The Confederacy sees this as a victory because they packed up, they left, and guess what? South Carolina has this empty fort that belongs to them now. After this battle took place, there were 4 more states that joined the Confederacy. The 4 states that joined were Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas. So if we look at this map here, these are the original Confederate states down here, these 7. Okay. Then we have Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas join the Confederacy after this battle. These border states, now there's several states here that are kind of on the border between the North and the South. This is where we're going to see a lot of battles take place. And some states like Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, Missouri, they never officially joined the Confederacy. And the main reason they never officially join is because eventually, when we're in the middle of this war, a lot of the battles are going to be taking place in these areas. And they don't want to give the North any reason to come invade their land unnecessarily. Same thing with the South. They don't really want Southerners coming up here to fight on their land. So they're trying to stay out of this as best as they can. And they don't really want to pick sides. So we'll talk more later about how that changes. Eventually, part of Virginia, okay, Virginia did go ahead and join the Confederacy, like we just talked about. They were one of the 4 states that joined. But there's a large group of people over here in the western side of Virginia that did not agree with this, and they did not want to be part of the Confederacy. And eventually we see a new state emerge, which is West Virginia. Okay, so that's where we get West Virginia from. We'll talk more about that in our next unit. So this wraps up our notes for our, let's see here. This wraps up our notes for the sectionalism. We are going to have a day where we recap these notes. I'm going to make another video that highlights all the major points from the first 5 days of sectionalism. So our next video will be about me recapping everything you've learned. I'll throw in a little bit of new information there. So I would definitely encourage you to tune in and listen, because some of the information that we didn't talk about in the previous videos, I will do my best to mention in this last video so that we have all the information you need from sectionalism before we jump into the Civil War. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope that you've learned something. I hope that this format has been helpful for you. If you need to go back and rewatch any of these, I encourage you to do that. I encourage you to go and look it over. Ask questions if you need to. If you're missing questions on the worksheets or the quizzes, more than likely it's because you may have missed that video or part of that video, or maybe you just fell asleep. Whatever it may be, go back and rewatch, or focus on the recap video that will be coming out next. I hope you all have a great day. Hope you've enjoyed your time at home. Stay safe, and don't forget to wash your hands. Bye-bye.